Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. There's still some people coming through into the main room, but yeah, we'll make a start. So, good morning and welcome to your second Communities of Practice on engaging men and boys in gender equality. And I say second, that's the second Communities of Practice for this year, which is year 4 of the Preventing Violence Together strategy. My name is Zoe Francis and I'm the Health Promotion Coordinator at Women's Health in the South East. And Women's Health in the South East is the lead agency for the regional Prevention of Violence Against Women strategy. Delighted to see, again, such strong support for this work reflected in the numbers here today. I'd like to start our session today with an acknowledgement of country and, of course, acknowledge that it is NAIDOC week this week, given COVID. Obviously, we don't normally celebrate it in November, but yeah, there's some wonderful events still happening online, as I'm sure you have seen. So, acknowledging in the traditional owners, the language of the traditional owners, Wominjeka, welcome to the session today. Wominjeka is welcome in the Bunurong and Wurundjeri language spoken in the Kulin Nation, the traditional owners of Melbourne. I'm on the land of the Bunurong people here today, and on behalf of WISE and everybody here today, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional lands and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and of course to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people here today. Our session today, we've allotted 2 hours. We may or may not use it all. Please ensure, of course, that you're on mute. We know you know all of this, but just a quick reminder. If you do want to post a question throughout the session, we really encourage you to do that. Get your thinking caps on and please be proactive in terms of getting those questions in the chat. There is an opportunity for questions and answers at the end of the session, so feel free at that point to take yourselves off mute and ask on the camera. This session is being recorded, just to flag that with you. Of course, if it is your preference to switch your camera off, please feel comfortable to do that. We do encourage you to keep it on. It's always nice to keep the session a little bit more interactive, but ultimately, of course, very much your choice. And for safety and for technological reasons, use of headphones is, of course, best practice where possible. So what are we going to look at today? Well, in a moment, I'm going to hand you over to my colleagues who work at Mornington Council, at Family Life and at Jesuit Social Services, who are working together to plan a fabulous project funded by Vic Health called Men and Boys Making It Happen. And we are super excited to have this project in our region. This is a Vic Health funded project, and we're really looking forward to hearing how the work is progressing in the planning stages. We're then going to move to hear from Kerry Harridge, who is a wellbeing manager at Edithvale Primary School and is doing some fantastic work in the school on their respectful relationships work. So really looking forward to welcoming back Kerry, who you may remember from our Communities of Practice 2 months ago. We're going to have a bit of an update on the work that Kerry's doing and also hear a case study. 5-minute quick tea break to grab a cup of tea, and then we're going to come back to hear from Dalal Smiley, who is the CEO of Wellsprings for Women. Dalal is going to speak to a fantastic piece of research that Wellsprings have done with Melbourne Uni, which is looking into the migrant experience of men pre and post-migration, specifically looking at gender roles and how that's changed for them. As I mentioned before, then we'll have approximately 20-25 minutes for questions and answers. So really good opportunity there to ask those questions, and then we'll move to an evaluation and close. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to hand over to Mandy Roach from Mornington Shire Council, who is going to tell us more about their Men and Boys Making It Happen project. Over to you, Mandy.
Well, thank you so much, Zoe, and thanks so much for inviting us to this forum, because like you, we are pretty super excited to get this Vic Health Healthier Masculinities funding. Yeah, as you mentioned, one of 2 across the state. So we are more than super excited. So presenting with me today is, I'm Mandy Roach, Equity and Inclusion Officer at Mornington, Peninsula Shire. Presenting with me is Ali Madden from Family Life, and she'll explain the backbone organisation in this partnership, and Paul Zappa, who some of you might know, who has presented before from Jesuit Social Services. The Men's Project, you may have heard of that, and the Man Box study is all part of Paul's work. So I'll just kick us off with what the project is, and then hand over to Paul to go into a bit more detail about the deliverables of the project. So overall, what we want the project to do is to advance gender equality and improve health and wellbeing for men, boys, and the broader community across the Mornington Peninsula. The project is based on the Man Box research, which shows that the pressure on men to follow outdated stereotypes of masculinity is contributing to their anxiety, depression, risky drinking, and violence against women. So as I said, we got the Vic Health funding. It is for 120 Ks over 2 years. And the timing, I think, was really right for us, because we launched our gender equality strategy in just before COVID hit, would you believe, in March this year. And that sets a 10-year vision for the Mornington Peninsula to reduce violence against women and their children, and by increasing gender equality. So this project fits, beautifully as an action of that strategy. So just moving on, yeah, great. The project deliverables, really what we want to do, and we're a bit excited about the model, because it is about mobilising, engaging, training up and empowering local men, boys and the broader community in building and promoting healthier masculinities. So building a bit of a momentum for people to take their own action in their settings that they're in everyday life in their communities. So I'll hand over to Paul now, because what we're working with Jesuit Social Services is to deliver these training and education packages across the Mornington Peninsula. Paul, are you happy to go give an overview of that?
Would you mind just going back to the previous slide, just one tick, thanks. Because I think it's important that there may be some people who don't know, when they see a man box, what does that mean? And the man box is pretty much explained in that the norms in society that we've been told how to be, in inverted commas, a real man, strong, tough, doesn't cry, all those things. And it's reinforced or policed by language usually. So I want to belong. I want to belong to the group. I feel comfortable in that group. I may not necessarily like what's happening, but I want to belong to the main group. And if I try to change or step out of that man box, then language that is associated with being weak or non-manly is used to put me back in. So you'll hear words like faggot or sissy or wuss and these sorts of words, which don't seem like much. And some of us men do a good job of putting some mask on for, having it all into control. But those words do hurt, and those words do threaten men, because it's about putting you outside of a group, outside of where you feel comfortable that you belong. So the Man Box research delves right into that and talks about the impacts of that. So that's the base of all our work. I also wanted to say, for the project deliverables, the idea behind the Unpacking the Man Box session at the launch event is so that we generate some interest, we generate some conversation across the community. And at the end of that, we'll encourage people to sign up for the Modelling of Respect and Equality training, our MORE program, which is a much, much deeper dive. It was formerly, pre-COVID, it was 2 days worth of rich conversation and learning, followed by a 6-month community practice. With COVID around, we'll deliver it in an online setting. and still have the community of practice and those things happening as well. And then it says unpacking man workshops in 3 townships. What we thought with that was then participants in more to then go and engender some interest in their local parts of Mornington Shire, and we go out and we reactivate other parts of the community again. So that's kind of the kind of big picture process. And then on the next slide, if we just flip to that. So what we're trying to do is at the individual level to reflect, what are my attitudes and behaviours, you know, related to stereotypes, and we've all got habits of mind. What are they? What do I know about, if I want to decrease these behaviours, what can I do? And we propose that the idea of being aligned with healthier forms of masculinities, using emotional intelligence work helps me to shift towards a healthier way of being a man, or showing my masculinity. So that's at the individual level. And then we say, once you've kind of taken that on and you want to influence others in the community, how do you do that? So this knowledge about working with boys and men. So this is for, by the way, for men and for women. Our whole belief is that men and women working together will be the best way we can do this. Some men will be more likely to listen and speak to women than others, and other men with men. And so we need to get this message right across the community. Which we're calling it a movement. We'd love to get these, what we're calling change allies, out and engaging with people, and at many forums and in many different ways. And then obviously the part around partnerships, we've already put some strong partnerships together, but the opportunity then is for the local community partners to come together, and as everyone, you know, wants to see some sort of sustained project that goes beyond the life of the inverted commas project and becomes a movement, becomes a way that our community does, or a culture of encouraging and almost expecting healthier forms of masculinity, is how I'd put it. And most importantly, for young boys and men at the moment, they won't come up and tap you on the shoulder and say, can you teach me how to be a healthy man? It's just not going to do that. So they're waiting, and they're watching. So if we can enable, you know, already brilliant people in the community, maybe a footy coach or a netball coach or whoever it is, and they then start realising that they're a community role model, then suddenly, without having to create any new places, so it's still at the clubs or wherever, we can start changing how we model to young people, and they then will be learning through the modelling or through the capacity to feel confident they can ask some questions.
So moving on to the governance model of the project. So back in 2018, Family Life approached the Mornington Peninsula Shire. We were just coming off the back of a successful project called Together We Can, which was in partnership with Cardinia Shire. Family Life was doing the function of the backbone role in that particular project. So we were working from a collective impact approach. And that project went really well, and we have a lot of relationships and partnerships across Mornington Peninsula Shire. So I guess our management liaised with different managers, leadership throughout Mornington Peninsula Shire about the idea of us working together to, you know, either eliminate, stop family violence across the Shire too. So from those conversations, we then actually developed what we call the Mornington Peninsula Family Violence Collaboration. So that sort of established in and around the 2018 period. We've got loads of different members on that collaboration, which is fantastic. So we've got the Principal Strategic Advisor from the Bayside Peninsula Integrated Family Violence Partnership, WISE. Kitty is on board with the partnership, which is fabulous. We've got the Primary Care Partnership, Peninsula Health, Vic Police, the Department of Human Services, Brotherhood of St Lawrence. We also have victim survivor representatives and advocates, and the Department of Education has recently hopped on board. So that Mornington Peninsula Family Violence Collaboration, I guess, is the overarching umbrella of the men's and boys, which kind of sits under that collaboration. Also, back in 2019, Family Life and WISE pulled together available data around the challenges and drivers of family violence too, which helped us to kind of build a picture of what was going on within that community. And we also engaged Deakin University, who did a couple of workshops with us around causal loop. So that certainly also added the story to what is a really complex and wicked issue at the end of the day. We also had Mornington Peninsula Shire, who launched their gender equality strategy, and that wasn't a small feat by any chance. That was years of work leading up to that process and community engagement too. So all of this kind of sits in and feeds around these projects that we're talking about. So sitting above the men's and boys making it happen is we've currently got a project management group. So Mandy sits on that group, I sit on that group, and the project coordinator, who we'll be hiring very shortly, will also sit on that group. So I guess we're the doing body of the project. We're the ones that will be organising the events, will be the ones that will be reaching out to community. And then sitting above that, we have what we've called our project leadership group. So that has representatives of Family Life general managers, and also the senior social planner of Mornington Peninsula Shire. So they're the ones that can, I guess, if we hit any roadblocks, they can give us direction, they can give us guidance, but also they're, I guess, the strategic body of that project. So you've kind of got the two layers, but above those two layers, you've then still got that governance process of the Family Violence Prevention Collaborative too. So that group doesn't provide any, I guess, direction. It is more of a feedback, ideas. We may utilise some of the bodies on that group to assist us with some of the events that we're doing. They might come along, be guest speakers. Certainly we'll be wanting support from them in terms of engaging community too. So there'll be lots of roles and functions for them to do, but they are more of an ideas, a support to us, I guess. So moving on to the evaluation, so Monash University is appointed as the evaluator for this project, but also Jesuit Social Services has their own evaluation tools in terms of obviously the man box and the more training, and Family Life's project, she's the Rome coordinator, so she's the research and evaluation measure outcomes coordinator. She's also involved too and will be assisting that process. So there's, I guess, Monash is going to be the lead of it, but they'll still be utilising different expertise within Jesuit Social Services, Mornington Peninsula Shire and Family Life to inform and help that evaluation too. So we have, we're hoping that we will reach 1,500 people through this project. And when I talk about reach, I'm not just talking about the people that will be at the launch or the training. I'm talking about the people they will then also influence as well. So we're really hoping to capture as much evidence and outcomes as we possibly can through those ripple effects of people doing the training, but then the conversations that they have too. I know for myself, when I attended, Paul, your Jesuit Social Services workshop last year, when I came away from the WISE community of practice, I didn't stop talking about what I heard in the man box session. So, I spoke to other people at work, I spoke to family, I spoke to friends, and I still, even last night when I had an osteo appointment, I was speaking to my osteopath as well and chatting to her about it too. So, any one of us, when we get this knowledge, we can share that amongst so many other people and just educate them, just to get them think a little bit differently. So, so we're hoping to reach very far with this project. Yesterday, we started the process of our theory of change, which was exciting, and that very much does, I guess, it maps out, what activities we're doing, what short and interim outcomes we hope to achieve from those activities, and then what the intended long-term impact of that activity is. So we're working on that at the moment. We did our first draft yesterday. We're also about to commence the evaluation framework too. So like I said before, that will have JSS involved in that process with their tools. Family Life will be creating some tools, and obviously Monash will also be assisting in that process as well. Another thing we're going to do with this project is, where possible, we're wanting to document our journey and our experiences along the way. So yesterday we actually filmed our theory of change. We actually filmed that so we can pluck pieces out of that to create a really good story at the end of the day. We'll also be filming elements of the launch, the man box information sessions and training, and also the more training too. So wherever possible, we're wanting to capture, I guess, video evidence of people's stories or information that's shared. And then we'll actually compile all that to make a really nice package and story at the end of the project. I think that's it for me. Back to Mandy.
Thanks, I'll just touch on where we're at. As Zoe in the introduction said, we're in the planning stage, which is correct. So we're still in that first phase of establishment and planning. So what we've, oh, my voice is gone, hold on. So we've been finalising agreements between all the partnerships. We work, you know, the governance structure. As Ali just said, we're getting onto the theory of change to inform the evaluation framework. We'll very shortly be recruiting a project coordinator. We're pretty clear on the project plan. We've developed a communications plan, and we've just developed a community engagement plan as well. So we'll be happy to come back to this group at a later stage when obviously when we move into the doing, we're going to have a lot of lessons learned and things to share about challenges and things along the way. But then we'll move, oh, sorry, Ali, I haven't finished. And then we'll, in the next month or so, move into phase 2, where we're looking at finalising the format and logistics of the launch event, which will be held on the 24th of March, and develop an expression of interest and recruitment process for the more training, which will kick off in May, but we want to promote that at the launch event and market and promote the launch event. Then we'll move into phase 3, which is actually the delivery. So as we've mentioned, we'll have the launch, which leads into the more training, and then build on that with the 3 unpacking the man box sessions in 3 townships, which will be Hastings, Rosebud and Mornington, because it's such a big geographical area that we work in here. So that tends to work best for all our work out here. And then we'll move into phase 4, evaluation and sustainability. But of course, as you can hear, we're already thinking about that in phase 1. I mean, I think it's great to have Monash Uni involved and really be clear up front. What is it that what are the outcomes for this project, so that we can measure it along the way. And sustainability, we need to be thinking about all the time, how can we take this forward after the funding finishes. And I know that, for instance, the community of practice that is part of the more training, Jesuit Social Services works with that group for 6 months. We need to look at how is that sustainable then after that, just to give you an idea of one element of the program. I just wanted to try to capture some learnings and talk about some challenges. I mean, I just think this whole area of work of healthier masculinities is, I don't know, I've written there it's new, but it's evolving all the time, and we're continuously learning. And we're being led a lot by the work that Vic Health are doing in this space. They've recently put out a Framing Masculinities message guide. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, that's on the Vic Health website, and it's fantastic. And obviously, you know, we're working with Jesuit Social Services, so we're in good hands in the work that they have done, you know, with men and boys in community over many, many years. I'll hand to Paul in a minute because we wanted to quickly show you, we didn't know if you've seen the Breaking Free from Outdated Rules video that Vic Health put out, I think only a few weeks ago, and just get your thoughts on that in a minute. One of the other things, I guess, as you can hear, the project is working with heaps and heaps of partners. And I think, and especially I think in COVID and being online, already a lesson we've learned is, you know, that's taking a lot longer than I think we all thought. So just allowing, if you're doing a project like this, allowing heaps of time in that kind of planning phase so that all partners, you know, are building the same understanding and on the same page. That takes actually quite a few months to do, and is constantly evolving. And I think it's going to be interesting to have that launch event online and how we engage community, you know, online. Like, I think in all our heads, we were thinking, yeah, it'll be like the launch we did earlier this year and have 350 people in a room. And you know, that is not the reality. So we're working through how best to work with our comms team about how to engage community online. And Paul's already, you know, I think the use of short, sharp videos and building some momentum, and for instance, using this video to just start people thinking before the launch is some of the ways we're going to go about it. Do you think it's a good time to show that video, Paul?
Yes, I've just posted it on the chat, and it goes for approximately 2 minutes. So if people want to follow that link to the chat, on the chat, and when you're finished, just come back and just give us in the chat, just put a Y, as in yes, I've finished. Then we can allow time for people to watch that, and then we can come back and continue our conversation. So feel free now to go and click on the link, watch it, and when you're finished, just put a Y in the chat. Thank you. Mandy, it looks like most people are coming back out of that now. So maybe in another, 20 seconds, we'll continue to talk about what we've learned so far?
I just want to echo something Mandy was saying before in terms of the amount of planning you need. I think Mandy and I see each other maybe 2 or 3 times a week now, some weeks, because we have so many different meetings, whether that's a meeting with, so we've actually got a meeting this afternoon and we had a meeting yesterday as well. So yeah, I think that planning phase is really critical because it's about getting everyone on the same page. So, and I think when you're the arms and legs of the project, like Mandy and I and the project coordinator will be, the doing people, we kind of need to have our eyes across what's happening in terms of the comms team, what's also happening in terms of the evaluation. So we don't need to be the experts per se, but we still need to have an eye across that to know when to get things on the go or when things need to be paused and stuff like that too. So yeah, I think that's just kind of echoing what Mandy was already saying, that yeah, the amount of time you need when you're sort of setting these things up until things start to be implemented and things are actually starting to move along. We'll start seeing each other less next year, I imagine. But yeah, at the moment, there is a lot of in-kind contribution from both the Shire and Family Life to get this right, to get all the I guess the platforms in place, the good foundations in place. So this is a really successful project.
I'll also share that tonight we're starting in the city of Hogsons Bay an online more project. And because you're trying to engage with people who are kind of outside of the practitioner base, when they hear the man box or when they hear stereotypical masculine norms, it all rings bells for us, but not necessarily. And so the messaging is really important, and a lot of people, I suppose, don't see themselves necessarily as a person who would be part of this. So trying to get the narrative out that we're talking about everyday mum and dads as people who can be great contributors in this space, I think is part of our work. And I think that means continually putting our work in a form that is easily accessible to people. I think that's really, really important. And which doesn't mean we dumb it down. It just means like that video there or whatever it might be, something that would spark some interest, and then pointing them back to some sort of base where there's more information that they can follow up. And the other thing we learned was then to offer a couple of information sessions for potential participants so that they could get a better detail exactly what happens, which you can't really get off a flyer. So that those two things have helped. I think we've got 25 people coming tonight. So I think that the learnings for us in this will be our, I think the 5th more that we've delivered is just getting those stakeholders to realise that they are a stakeholder because they're not necessarily coming from the space that we all already acknowledge a lot of this work and we nod at it. They're still getting their heads around whether that's something for them or not.
Yeah, right. It raises a really good point because I think, you know, when you call people like champions, we're going to go and find nobody thinks they're a champion necessarily, do they? And so we need to really describe in this, we weren't wanting people who can influence others, but they might not realise that they're influencers. So we'll break that language down to really say it's about, if you're already, a sporting coach or, you know, you're working at a primary school, you're already that. And after we speak, Kerry will introduce herself, and it's a really good example of taking this work, what we're about to do, and showing how it has played out and influenced the primary school that she works at. And she is an influencer, and she might not have, I don't know, labelled herself at that before doing the training, but I think that's the critical point of the next bit. Ali, are you happy to go to the last slide? Zoe, did you want me to take questions now, or are we saving that for the the panel at the end?
Yeah, so we have got about a few minutes now, definitely. We've got, at least 10 minutes if people have questions now, because they might be more front and center of mind than perhaps at the end of the session. So yeah, please feel free to take yourself off mute and ask any of the team questions, or alternatively pop them in the chat. I might ask you one both just while people are having a bit of a think, if that's all right.
Should I stop sharing my screen now?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Oh,
thanks, Ali.
there you go.
Yes, so I was just wondering, with the messaging and getting, influencers in the community, you had some great conversation there about how you do that when you're working with practitioners is obviously very different to how you do it in the community. I remember having a conversation with one of the team at Tomorrow Man, who we haven't worked with closely, and that particular person was saying that in their sessions, sometimes what they do is frame the work around the importance of a man's role in looking after their son and daughters, obviously, but also looking after their mates. So have you had any conversations in your planning meetings about that and framing how to get that leverage from men and boys in the community? Rather than the focus being on, you as a man and your behaviours, that might be more effective to talk about other men in men's lives.
Do you want to answer that, Paul, or do you want me to?
I'll answer that at first by saying that the term healthier masculinities has been quite powerful of having because it has a growth or strength-based approach to it. So it's not identifying what you aren't good at. It's challenging you to be the best or the best side of yourself. And we went particularly to the plural of masculinities as well, because we wanted to identify that ideally in a group of 90 men, there should be the freedom to be any type of masculinity that works for you. And I could have 90 forms of masculinities, hopefully, and we're getting the best side of those. And I think that's kind of opened up the conversation. So we're not creating a new ideal man box again.
Yeah, great. So yeah, using the positive framing.
And I think, just for me, it's about, like, we're not talking about violence or gender health and well-being. And I feel like that's inviting people to the space, because it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yes.
That you want to be healthier, and that can be for your kids, or for whoever. But that's what we liked about the program, that it's kind of that broader health and well-being.
Yeah, great. So will it include mental health as part of the aspired outcomes of the project?
Zoe, it would be something we put down as, an auxiliary outcome. Like we're determined to maintain the focus on preventing men's violence against women, but we'll be trying to capture what else, because if you look at the man box research, if it was a spoken wheel kind of thing, you can see we could possibly have impacts on drink driving, risk-taking, any risk-taking behaviour, hopefully mental health, and we do a big session on emotional intelligence. So they ideally should be secondary outcomes, but I suppose the main purpose of this is to bring awareness to the impact that stereotypical masculinity has upon violence against women.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying. Okay.
Is there any questions, or?
Yeah, does anybody have any questions? Otherwise we can.
Yeah, I have a question.
Can I?
There's,
Dalal?
I can see Amita, and then I can see also Dalal. So could we go Amita first and then Dalal? Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. My question is, because I'm personally myself from a different background, and I'm wondering how we can engage more men and boys in other communities, especially the new arrivals that maybe they're not really still on top of the, for example, going to YouTube and search for something to educate themselves. First of all, is anywhere else, is that possible that we have these resources available somewhere that is more accessible for people? And also, is that possible that we have them maybe with some subtitles, maybe in some different languages? Or I don't know, you know how when people come to Australia, we give them some information about their rights, their eligibility, what they are entitled for, like how we can cover this in a sense that we also give them, as much as we give information to women about their rights, we also give alternative to men to understand, you know, not their right, but like how to protect the women's right by being a better man or a healthier man.
I think you're preempting Dalal's presentation in a minute, so I think you're going to get a lot of information out of that. Paul, have you got any comments? Because you're about to kick off in Hobson's Bay, which has high cultural diversity. And I know definitely I saw on the expression of interest, you know, there was options in different languages and things like that. We probably haven't got to that level in this project yet, but we will certainly learn from what's happening across other local government areas.
And I'll take one of those points you made as a really good one that we haven't done yet is have some subtitles underneath. We have a main video explaining the man box, which is really popular. But I'll take that on board. That I don't think, excuse me for not knowing 100%. I've been at the men's project for 12 months, I should know, but I don't know that we've subtitled it. I don't know that we have. So I'll take that on board. That's a really good point. And yes, I think Dalal will mention that. And we're also doing some work in the Muslim community at the moment as well, and seeing it as very much a learning space where we're running a lot of small focus groups so we can get an understanding where people tell us what we should do rather than us thinking we know. So we're at the very early stages. That's separate from this project, but we're at the very early stages of looking at the different cultural expectations of masculinity, because we know that there are many.
Thank you.
Dalal, did you want to? Yeah.
Yeah. My question to all of you, Paul and the rest, is about how much is systemic issues related to patriarchy addressed or tackled? I just find sometimes that we are focusing a lot on individual people and individual behavior rather than about systems that create those behaviors in society and those norms. I mean, to me, it's about patriarchy much more than it is about masculinity.
And we do go into that. So we look at masculinity being a construct and how that is constructed. And then that straight away segues us to what's the environment that we've created that that a young boy or a man has come to these conclusions on how they should be a man. And so, yeah, definitely the patriarchy at work is something that we acknowledge, and how everything from media to sporting clubs and the influence of culture into which they're immersed has an impact upon what they think they have to be. So yes, we do cover it.
And I'm also thinking as well, as part of the MORE training, community members that actually attend the MORE training will then go on and develop their own projects. So if we have people from education, sports and recs, business, the idea is that they will all develop a project within their community, whether it's sports, business, to address these matters as well. So I'm kind of hoping that they'll be really vast and varied. So there may be some projects within that actually look at some of those systems as well as on top of individual changes that people can make too. Hopefully they can kind of embed some, I guess, cultures within football or within business, change policies and stuff like that too. So that's really where the community will kind of hop on board and they will have choices around what they want to do and what that will look like as well. Sorry, there's
Yeah.
a comment in the chat box.
Okay, so I've got a question, comment from Kate to add to what Paul and Ellie are saying. We're at the Mornington Peninsula Shire, and we see this project as part of our broader gender equality strategy, which has a broader system focus, which is actually what I was going to jump in and say that this work is regional work. We can't change the world, but we are changing our region. It sits within PVT, the regional strategy, and that's obviously where we are today, making sure that the work has exposure to everybody if they want to join us today who does this work, or even the broader workforce. Certainly working online, as I'm sure you've all experienced, has massively increased our reach of this work, certainly at WISE and for the regional strategy. So yeah, just looking at a regional level, I think we're doing pretty well in terms of accessing and influencing that broader workforce of people who are in youth development and in roles that don't firmly have PVOR and GE front and centre. So yeah.
There was a question from Rob. Rob, did you want to ask a question?
Hey everyone. I might preface my question by just giving you some quick background. I work for Monash Health in the Refugee Health team as a community development worker, but my former vocation was really focused on men's health. And so I created Pit Stop, men's parenting course, and a few other things, Male Health Victoria, founding president of that peak body. That's now been folded, and the peak body for men's health in Australia is now kind of taking over that role. The Australasian Men's Health Forum, I think they would be very interested in what you've come up with, this model. Just wondering if you've had any interaction with them and whether that could end up being part of their national conference to be able to present that.
I'll answer that with a no, Rob, personally, but I'm not sure if anyone else has come in contact with that group, but I'm definitely keen to follow that up. Thank you, Rob, for bringing that to our awareness. Appreciate it.
Okay. I'll let you know who to contact.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, great idea, Rob. Thank you. Excellent. Okay, we've probably got time for one more question if we do have one. Doesn't seem that we've got one in the chat at the moment. So unless anybody wants to jump in with a quick question, I'm going to hand over to Kerry Harwich to take the floor and tell us about the wonderful work that's happening at Edith Vale Primary School. And thanks to everybody from Mornington Shire Council and from Jesuit and of course from Family Life.
Thanks so much,
Zoe.
Zoe. That's
right then.
Fantastic. Well, I'll just share. So as Zoe mentioned before, I am the wellbeing leader, but I'm also a Year 2 classroom teacher at Edith Vale Primary School. And I was really privileged to be part of the Respect for Relationships training, just a catch-up session, because I've done a fair bit in the past, where Paul Zappa actually shared a lot about man box and healthier masculinities in schools. And it really resonated with me because of personal things, but also what I was seeing in schools I've worked at. I worked for a long time in Cranbourne School with a highly socially disadvantaged background over there. It used to be one of the highest SFO schools, so I had a very high rating of financial and social distress. So a lot of these things resonated with me in terms of particularly boys being forced into the man box as such by their interactions with others, but also things that we were doing as a school. So what I did subsequent to the training to really push this home with my staff was to create my own professional development session. A lot of it was based around the Respect for Relationships training, and I took bits and pieces from the man box and put in lots of clips for our staff to engage with, and I created a case study. So the aim of the case study was for our teaching staff to see, well, where are the points of intervention? It's very much based on a young child trajectory from very first entry into the world all the way up to the end of his Year 6. Being a primary school, we wanted to really hone in on that. And excitingly this week, I've actually spoken with the 5-6 teachers who said they're actually now sharing this case study amongst their students. So it's gone beyond just the staff and finding the points of intervention to actually the kids then stepping in and them having their say. Student voice and agency is big. It's one of our key priorities. So it's really exciting to see that those children that are up the higher end of the school who have that ability to really understand what's going on can go for that. I can see your hands up there, Paul. Oh, thank you. Okay, so let's get into the case study. So a baby boy is born. He is the second child to his parents, aged 30 and 32. His sister is 21 months older than him. The boy grows. He's very cuddly and affectionate, but also very busy and active. He's very close to his sister until the age of 3 or 4 when he becomes obsessed with sport, particularly ball sports, so much so that he stops playing dress-ups, playing with dolls, drawing, enjoying books and creating like his sister loves to do. At kinder, he's drawn to the sporty boys and he's always outside kicking the footy and running around. His teacher finds it difficult at times to harness his high energy levels, especially on rainy days. He starts school and the adjustment is huge. He attends a primary school without his 5 best buddies, who have all chosen to go to a different neighbourhood school. He finds it hard not to run around whenever he wants, but he's very switched on to learning and shows a particular fascination with maths. In grade 1, he finds a girl and they quickly become the very best of friends. She gets called a tomboy. They challenge each other academically and spend a lot of time together playing sport, on play dates and having sleepovers at each other's houses. By year 3, it's not so socially acceptable for the boy to have a female best mate. They're drawn apart by their peers due to put downs, negative comments and peer pressure. The boy is excelling academically and wears his emotions close to the surface. However, at school, these normally manifest as anger and frustration because he sees them as more appropriate for a boy to express. He has a big personality. He loves contributing to class discussions and helping others, but this masks his low self-esteem and how hard he is on himself. He's hugely empathetic, particularly towards his friends, and will do anything for them, sometimes to his own detriment. In year 4, he doesn't gel with his teachers, and he has particular trouble with another male classmate. He uses language that he's heard from others that hurts some feelings and creates problems. When confronted, he goes into fight mode and he feels as though he's the only one accused and reprimanded and that he has to save face. Feels like he's always in trouble, but doesn't want to seem weak, so tries to take it on the chin and not tell others or share his struggles. He gets into a few disagreements in the yard and a behaviour support plan is developed. In year 5, he starts with a fresh slate and is really keen to begin with his new teacher. However, after his teacher goes on paternity leave, something changes. He's branded too talkative, disrespectful, and told that he does not demonstrate persistence in learning or the ability to apologise when he's confronted. He seeks approval from his peers because he feels his teachers have given up on him and don't care. In discussion with the school, his parents are told that he's been using derogatory language towards women and that they're concerned about the wolf pack he is part of. His parents educate him about his derogatory comments and discuss why the language is so detrimental and how they will work together to help him. The school asks that the family address the language behind closed doors with no wider discussions at school. His family continues to talk with him about his language and interactions with his mates. The parents of his friends and his own parents discuss the language being used together and try to keep the kids accountable. The school are not aware of these conversations. The year continues and the family is finally called in for a meeting late in term 3. The school describes the boy's behaviour as antisocial and disrespectful, yet asks that the family discuss this with him themselves. They also say that he's unwilling to apologise and take responsibility after incidents, despite the family sharing that this is very difficult for him due to his low self-esteem and that he sought ongoing psychology to assist with. The boy has been placed himself in a man box. He has conformed to gendered stereotypes of being strong, not weak, to fight rather than back down, to lead rather than follow, to be hard and not soft. But this all masks who he really is: sensitive, caring, empathic, and helpful. The good news, in year 6, his situation turns around. He has a teacher who gets to know him inside out. She communicates with his parents regularly and knows how he ticks. She provides a safe place for him to be his true self, honest, vulnerable, kind, and to share how he really feels. She unpacks stories with him around social justice and difference, and his thinking and behaviour completely changes. She makes him accountable for the words that he says and the behaviours he exhibits. She works closely with his parents and helps him find a way out of his man box. He holds his head high all year and finishes his primary school journey a calm, caring, settled, and confident young man. The case study hits pretty close to home with things that have happened in our family of origin. And a lot of it was really about where could there have been intervention. So we have a staff that's quite young, quite a few that haven't got their own children, but we've got quite a lot of staff who are involved in local sports and that type of thing. So a lot of what I wanted to draw out of this for them was a lot that I'd learnt through collaboration with Paul, was around how do we build these really healthy relationships with our students that are here on site with us and keep them accountable, but not in a punitive way, in an education way, so that if there's a negative comment or negative behaviour or something that's happened, we can then work on that, keeping them accountable, but building that relationship and explaining the why. I think so often in the past it's been, no, don't do that, but where's the explanation as to why? And that was a lot. The case study really highlights for me those points where all the child was looking for was someone to be that listening ear and to step in and say, hang on, that behaviour is not okay and we're going to help you work through that and this is why. So actions that have happened as a school as a result. The number one was prioritising those conversations. Now, we've obviously had 6 months where we have pretty much not had children on site. But as part of that, we prioritised wellbeing. So every class across the school has had at least 3 structured wellbeing sessions a week, unpacking all sorts of things from emotional literacy to how you're relating to one another. We've had a lot of conversations and dialogue around gender. And in fact, since coming back, we have said there is, it's not, what do you say? Oh, my voice is gone. It's the non-negotiable that we're focusing on topics 7 and 8, which is all the gender and identity and positive gender relations, which is part of the Respectful Relationships program, which Deep endorsed for us and have provided us with lots of material to use. So that has just been at the very top of our agenda, that kids have been away for 6 months. They're going to come back with all sorts of different ways of relating to one another. And we want to hit the ground running and say that this is a priority for us and why it's a priority. We've also had changes in the way that we report incidences. So Compass is our online reporting tool, sends out messages, all sorts of things. And all staff have had a PD on how to flag, particularly if it is anything in the gender-based sphere. We can actually put a little flag on it and that'll come through. It comes through to myself, the assistant principal and the principal. And we're looking then to potentially, at the moment, we haven't had a huge number of incidences, which is fantastic. We're only a few weeks back, but it is giving us that tool to see, are there trends in our incident data that we can then attack and potentially create smaller groups that we might then do some intense study on. You know, you need to have a look at this, or let's unpack this together, so that they're supported by their peers and also by us in how to relate to each other in a more positive way. The other thing that we have done is we're rewriting our school values at the moment, and all of the kids have been part of that process. So we've discussed, and we've very much gone from the side of saying, so one of our values might be being respectful. Well, what does that look like? And is that just a male thing? Is it a female thing? and talking about, you know, kindness. Well, does that mean that you're soft, or what does it actually mean? So unpacking each of those key values with the kids with a gendered lens, so that they get buy-in and really understand what those parts are and why they're important to us as a school. We're also rewriting our wellbeing and engagement policy with a gendered lens, and our inclusion and diversity policy. They're in the throes at the moment, and we'll go to school council fairly soon once we've got our edited drafts, and we're quite happy with where we sit with those. But that's making sure that those bullying has often been in there, which is a thing that the department have often put, but we've also got gender-based information in there as well, so that we're keeping the kids and ourselves as staff accountable to that. Something that my principal always laughs about, he's even changed your little things. Instead of sending out an email going, hey guys, it'll be hey everyone. So even those little bits of language where they may be quite male-centered are being adapted, so that we're keeping it at the fore and we're keeping each other accountable to that as well. And those conversations are happening through staff as well, and you're noticing that if there is something that someone's not sure about, they know that they can talk to someone else, or they'll come and knock on my door or the assistant principal's door and say, hey, I'm just thinking about this, what can we do about this? Which is fantastic, because I think in the past, probably up until I've been in education for 20 odd years, probably up until the last few years, wellbeing had sort of been, well, here's your book, go to lesson 1, open it up, off you go. Whereas now it's very much what's actually happening contextually, and therefore we'll build our wellbeing sessions around that, which is really exciting. We've also developed some partnerships. So courtesy of the case study and breakout rooms that I did as part of that session, there was another school that heard it, and they have actually asked our permission to use the case study and are pushing that out to their staff. We've also developed partnerships with a couple of others in our zone and a couple outside our zone who are saying, tell us what you're doing. And we're actually sharing lessons, sharing resources, whether they're video clips, whether they're examples of student work, bits and pieces like that, just to really build this whole area, which is really exciting. And the case study is actually going to be used as part of an undergraduate teacher training with Deakin University with regard to student wellbeing and respect for relationships resource use, so that those conversations are already happening at the university level before anyone's really even stepped into a classroom. We're talking in the first couple of years of their teacher training, which will then follow them through for their 4 years, depending on what their course structure is and that type of thing. So it's been really exciting. It's been really interesting, particularly. I teach obviously 7-year-olds, and the conversations that we've had from even the very lowest of levels, you know, looking at things like, you know, told the kids the other day in the Olympics, it was only men that were allowed to compete way back in the day. And, you know, we talk about, you know, men were up here and women were down here, and the kids know if I do this, that we're talking about that imbalance. It's really interesting that straight away, and they're coming up with these little things, well, that's not fair, which is really exciting. And they're really keen to share their stories. We even had one the other day where we were talking about males and females and whether they know any females who are leaders. And so a lot of them were coming up with, you know, ideas of people who are in their lives who fit into those spheres where traditionally they may not have. So it's been a really interesting, exciting little journey for us. We're still obviously in its infancy, and we're seeing how bits and pieces fit and how they're going to fit going forward. But we're certainly finding the kids are buying in, which is exciting, and they will actually challenge other kids, or they'll challenge us. You know, if guys comes out or something like that, you can't say that. So it's been a real positive for us as a school, and certainly a lot of backing from our principal as well, James. He's been fabulous. So yeah, that's us in a nutshell, which is really, yeah, really great to see.
Thanks, Kerry. Thank you so much for so much energy that you put into the work, and it's obviously reaping rewards. Does anybody have any questions for Kerry before we move to our 5-minute tea break? Danny, you mentioned, would you be willing to share the work with schools we're working on? Stonington and Port Phillip.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are they your? Yeah, great. And Ali says that this is so inspiring, Kerry. Well done on sustaining this important work. Yeah, and it's wonderful to hear the student voice and the kids calling each other out. I think that's just obviously a huge demonstration of the efficacy of everything, of your efforts. So well done.
Yeah, I think the exciting thing now is for us to hopefully, now that we're potentially back on site more, is then pushing it out more to the parents. So the kids are going home and they're talking about this at home, but we'd really love to see more potentially getting, engagement with Paul to do some bandbox training with our parent community to get that on board as well, which would be amazing.
Yeah, great. And now that you're in person, you can create those safe spaces and really, I imagine, build that culture. Did you manage to sustain the work throughout COVID when you were online, or did that?
Yeah, so we did. So there was a lot of wellbeing online. There wasn't so much of the gender relations, because we really feel like a lot of that happens in discussion with the kids bouncing off one another and giving examples. So we sort of waited, I guess, for term 4 to start, but we'd sort of set the seeds going, which was fantastic. Someone had asked what was the most useful out of respectful relationships. For us, it was stereotypes. So our kids have really found it interesting, breaking down those stereotypes that men and women are expected to conform to and challenging those. And mine, they'll almost roll around on the floor when you say things like, oh, boys have to be the bosses, and they just think it's hilarious. And, all sorts of other little bits and pieces, which is great.
Yeah, and that's actually very refreshing for us to hear, because sometimes in the sector we wonder whether the word stereotype is a bit jargonistic, but if kids have got it and they're loving and engaging with it, then that's super clarifying that it isn't jargon.
Yeah, absolutely. Even a lesson we did the other day, we sort of talked about, what was your favourite toy as a child? And then we went to, well, what colour was it? And so it became, that rich discussion around how even from the time you pop out, there can often be that imbalance.
Mandated.
Yeah.
Mandated gender. Danny mentions, thanks for your question, Danny. What deep resources from topic 7 and 8 did you find most effective? Yeah,
so that was around gender stereotyping. That was
that.
They were the key lessons that were the best for us.
Yeah. Great. And Armita, can we have access to this case study document, please?
Absolutely. No worries at all.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much, Kerry. Again, wonderful. I love the way that you read the story. It's like being back at primary school on the carpet. I think I mentioned that to you before, but I love the way that you read the story. Okay, so a 5-minute tea break for everyone. Please feel free to have a stretch, go and grab a cuppa. And we'll see you back here in kind of 4 to 5 minutes, which will be 1:15. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Rob, how are you? You there?
Yes, I am.
I'd love to know more about the group you referenced, and I haven't come across them. I think sometimes we're so busy in our own little headspace that we don't necessarily look up and see what else is out there. So that'd be great if you could connect me to whoever the right person to speak to there is.
Yeah, sure, no problem. The current president, he's actually got a background in suicide prevention,
right,
and the connection with mental health and with gender, as you've pointed out, being the influences there. So yeah, that'd be good.
Totally.
I think they'd be very keen to talk with you.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rob. Appreciate it.
It's all right. I'm just in the middle of writing a question for Kerry, but maybe you can answer this.
Here you go.
it was interesting in that case study that the boy's downward turn seemed to be precipitated around the time when his teacher went on paternity leave. So I'm assuming that teacher was a male, and whether that kind of had an impact on him.
It's a good question. I don't know the answer. I don't know. Yeah, I'd be interested to know too. Because
the absence of positive male role models in a child's life, and the lack of validation, maybe from his own father and maybe the male teacher, validating those other aspects of his life as a boy. So it'd be interesting to see whether that was intentional to have the teacher being a male.
Totally. Yeah, be very interested. I don't know, but yeah, definitely ask her. I'll have a chat with her later as well.
All right.
Yeah. Rob, are you able to stay until the end, and we can ask Kerry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because
I can just type my question. I don't have to be heard.
Yeah, go for it. However you wish.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. All right. I'll go to mute.
Okay. So we might get back to it, if that's all right with everybody. Can see a few people are probably still making their cuppa, actually. We'll give it another 30 seconds and then we'll make a start, Delal. Okay, welcome back everyone. So at this stage, we are now going to move to hear from Delal Smiley, who is the CEO of Wellsprings for Women. And Delal, as I mentioned at the beginning, is going to talk about a piece of research that she has done at Wellsprings together with Melbourne Uni called Men and Boys Speak Out Over Gender Norms. So over to you, Delal. Thank you.
Thank you. Just start. All right. Good morning, everybody. And thanks, Zoe, for this opportunity to share with you what we have been doing at Wellsprings for Women in relation to men. So a couple of years ago, I'll just see if this is working first. Okay, so I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land. I'm on the Wurundjeri land, and pay respect to their elders past and present. So some of you would know about Wellsprings for Women, and for those of you who probably haven't heard of us, we are a neighborhood house that is a women-only neighborhood house, and we're based in Dandenong. We outreach to Casey and Cardinia, and we provide a range of adult education, pre-accredited courses in literacy and numeracy. As a result of that, the majority of the women we engage with are from migrant refugee background. We have also support services for women who are, impacted by isolation or mental health issues, poverty, homelessness, or family violence. We started working in the area of gender equality and prevention of family violence for a long time, but wasn't really like a formal part of what we were doing. It was embedded in our interaction with the women who came to our center for a range of other services. And in 2017-18, we received some funding to do more work on gender equality, education, and on prevention of family violence. And as we were rolling out that information, the women who were part of our center talked about the fact that no one was talking to their men. It was okay for us to talk to them, but who was actually educating or engaging migrant refugee men in the conversation around gender equality and family violence? And when we looked around, we realized that there wasn't really a lot happening at that stage. Mainly the programs that engaged men were on behavioral change programs. So we started, consulting with some of the men in our region, and then there was this opportunity to apply for a small research, which we did in partnership with Melbourne Social Equity Institute and the Safer Families Centre of Research Excellence. So it was I must let you know from the beginning that it is a small research project. It was more like a consultation with a group of with 10 men from migrant refugee background. The ethnicity is based on the what was relevant to our area. So so they were mainly from they haven't been in Australia for a long time. The longest was about 10 years. Some were only had arrived about a few months before we did the consultation or the focus group. So our engagement with men then was related to the feedback we've had from the women, who were anxious about the fact that while they're developing that understanding and growing in relation to what is gender equality and what is family violence, that they didn't feel they were the ones equipped to engage with the men on this. They wanted, neutral people to be engaging with them on that. So the research itself that we did with Melbourne University, and before we did actually that research, we had established a kind of like a men's consultative group that we, as Wellsprings for Women, we sort of gathered with them. We met about 3 times and discussed these issues in general, talked about how they feel about things and where this could go. And then the research kind of followed after that. So the aim of our small research was to gather information from migrant and refugee men on how migration has in any way made them rethink their roles in society from a gender perspective. Now, Zoe asked me before this session about, and I think we talked about it at some stage, about what is whether the concept of gender, if there is an equivalent to that in other languages. And my background is in language services, so when we're translating this, there isn't a difference between sex and gender. They're kind of the same thing. So when you're trying to actually do education on this issue amongst some migrant and refugee, and I can't say I'm an expert on all languages, but the languages that I know and from the communities and from my own background in Arabic, for example, and from the women that I've spoken to at the center, when I asked them, no, it's the same word. So it's again a challenge. So we need to explain it and explain what we mean by the difference rather than assume that there is a difference. So some of the, so also the other thing I'd like to share to mention here is that this is not to say that what we've done and the findings and the views and what was said during the consultation necessarily applies to all men and migrant refugee men from all communities. Definitely not. And you would know that because there are many refugee or migrant communities who have settled here and they've been here for a long time. So we're not talking about communities who've been here for 20, 30 years. We're talking about almost new and emerging communities. So when we've asked them about their, what was it like before they came to Australia? What did the men and women do? What is the role of men? What's the role of women in their country of origin, in the culture they come from? And all of them talked about the, very different, very strictly defined roles between men and women. And I wanted, the reason I'm using a lot of the quotes is the idea was to actually bring their voices into the presentation rather than filter it through what I'm saying. Is I wanted their own words to actually be the reflecting the result of this. So they talked about there was a shared understanding, a shared finding, if you like, and feedback that in our culture and our society where we lived, most of the work of the women, most of work the women can't do. For example, the man is doing very hard job like physical work. Men can't wash the clothes in our country. And that the women, do the caring role and they stay home and they look after the children, etc. And that post-migration, what happens? But before I go to the post-migration, a lot of the men also mentioned that before migrating to Australia, their journey of migrating, sometimes they are into refugee camps. Some of them have fought wars in their country. They've been engaged in a lot of conflict. So the reinforcement of their gender identity as men is reinforced constantly throughout that migration journey, because they feel that they have to be the ones who are protecting the family. They're the ones who take the whole responsibility about the safety of the family. They have to be the ones making all the decisions and providing and protecting their families from any harm. So that kind of role of the man as a protector, as a provider, is reinforced throughout that migration journey. So they arrived to Australia, very different environment, very different circumstances, completely different culture, different environment, and suddenly things start to change. What they find is suddenly, wow, women here, they seem to them as being more dominant because they're more liberal, they have freedom, they can talk about their rights, they can get a divorce if they want to. Not to be, in many countries, as we know, and women cannot just decide to divorce their husbands. There's a lot of challenges and a lot of barriers to be able to do that. Not let alone, leaving a husband, leaving your family and leaving your husband is a big deal, let alone getting a divorce. So they come here, and for many of them, whether if they are already in a relationship, things start to change. If they're not in a relationship, like the single men in that group talked about how they found they had to look after themselves. You know, they have to, you know, wash their clothes, cook for themselves. So slowly they find that the mentality starts to change. And they also talked about how they see in Australia women in many different roles, whether in leadership roles or in, you know, they're women as doctors, as lawyers, and this is all kind of contributing to their changing to how they see the roles of men and women. So one of the things we asked them is what actually. But a couple of things I want to mention here before we move on to this one is when we're talking about gender and the stereotypes and stuff like that, there are some things also that don't apply from a Western point of view. So when we're talking about, for example, pink and blue and how those kind of colors are attributed according to gender, it doesn't necessarily apply in other cultures. So it wasn't a relevant thing for us to, when we were talking about that. They said that boys and girls wear all sorts of colors. It's not an issue in many cultures. So we asked them about, so what actually, what are the factors that assist men, especially migrant refugee men, in adapting to the changing roles in Australia in terms of how they see roles of men and women. And they mentioned intercultural connections as a big factor, that for communities who come to Australia, and if they are interacting outside of their own group, they are exposed to seeing different ways of living, different relationships, different ways of men and what men and women do. And that if they are interacting, this kind of thing starts to open their mind about how they understand those roles, and things start to change. So having that kind of, but if communities are isolated or are kind of like only interacting with each other, the change is not as smooth, if you like, as it would be if they were opening up to other communities. The other thing that that helps in men in making that kind of transition as well, and women, is having positive role models, especially from their own community. People who look like them, sound like them from their own community, who are demonstrating those kind of new ways of doing relationships, new way of expressing masculinity, or, you know, being a male or being a female. That also does help in getting them on board as well with those new understanding. And they find that especially if, for example, it's a couple and they've made those kind of changes, but they've stayed together and they're having a successful relationship, that is a powerful message as well, because sometimes they have associated the migration experience, the shock, if you like, of living, you know, of understanding, or men and women having different roles in Australia, with the breakdown of the family, with the fact that, you know, the Western values and the Western way of life has decimated their family unit. But when they see that there is, you know, positive examples in their community of people who have stayed together, but also have embraced new ways of expressing their gender, is a powerful message. The other thing that does help as well is time and space. The men have talked about how sometimes they felt that as soon as they come to Australia, that they're expected instantly to be, you know, to be embracing the change, to understand gender equality, to recognize what patriarchy is and all that stuff. But if there is time given and for them to make that adjustment, because as you would know, the settlement journey has is actually follows a certain trajectory. When they first arrive to Australia, there's a whole lot of things, priorities on their mind related to work, to settlement, to having housing, to securing, you know, schools for their children, securing jobs. So gender and that sort of stuff is not a priority at that stage. So they need to sort of address much more pertinent, if you like, priorities before talking about this issue. So time and space, allowing them time and space is very important. The other factor that also assisted the change, if you like, is the economic realities. They talked about the fact that in Australia, they felt that they are no longer able to be the sole provider in the family. The cost of living is high. It's expected of them to have higher, you know, salary or wage earning, and therefore women found, you know, that they had to go and work. And the fact that women are able to go and get a job and help them help financially with to support the family has led to a change in the dynamics as well. Not necessarily for all of them, but it is a contributing factor. We know that in some circumstances, even if the woman is going to work and earning a living, you know, it doesn't mean that she's kind of, you know, you know, that gender equality is necessarily achieved just through that. So the consequences for some families as a result of coming to Australia from, you know, very traditional, if you like, backgrounds where there is the roles were well defined and there was rigid gender roles, is that breakdown of relationships. Now, when we teased that out a bit with the group, it also was more like the couple, let's say, who came to Australia, they were not necessarily, they didn't choose to marry each other. They were in a way forced into a marriage of some kind. And when they came to Australia, it wasn't always necessarily because of the change in gender, but because women felt when they came here, they no longer needed to be in that relationship. They didn't want to be in it, and that it was possible for them to leave that relationship. For some, the change has also contributed to having family violence and many examples during the consultations were mentioned about the, you know, so many instances of family violence happening in many communities as a result of the clashes, if you like, between the men and the women in relation to their roles. There's been separation and divorce and loss of connection with extended family as a result of that. And that for some men, this led them to feel like they're losers and that women are the winners. And that there is a lack of support for newly arrived families in adjusting to the changes. So, as I mentioned, that this was a small, if you like, window into the minds of the men, migrant and refugee men that we have spoken to. What we have learned, and I'm, you know, like to share that with you as service providers out there interested in this topic, is that applying, you know, an intersectional approach and analysis when engaging with men on gender and prevention of violence against women is crucial. Understanding their background, the way they've come from, what was their experience before, what socialization they've had, what has been their migration experience. This will differ from community to community, from men, from between individual men as well. I mean, in the group that we talked to, there was one particular male who was a kind of like an exception to the others, where he grew up in a family that was very progressive back in his country of origin, where he talked about how his sisters, for example, were given more opportunities in life than he was. They were sent to the best schools, etc. And that his mother always worked and had a leadership role in the family. And in Australia, he had no issues whatsoever. His wife is the breadwinner. He was happy to stay at home and look after the children. So there will be examples like that. So it's very important that we don't actually put them all into some kind of a box as well. Having active and deep listening to men's experience is important. We need to sort of suspend judgment as we and rein in our unconscious bias, if you like, not make assumptions about, you know, about all men, if you like, and sharing men's insights within our gender equality and prevention of violence against women training. So for us, because we've been doing a lot of education and with women, being able to bring into those sessions men's voices and talking about what it's like for men as well, what they have told us, helps us in those sessions in providing insight to the women about how the men are seeing this issue. And also we have, through that exercise and through this, been able to develop positive connection with men as allies, so that, you know, if we're going to continue doing this kind of work, we have a group of men we can draw on to be, you know, positive role models to other men in their community. We found that what's needed is having safe spaces for migrant and refugee men to share their experiences, discuss things with each other, talk about what has helped, what hasn't helped, how they tackle these things, how they can also, what does that mean for them as you know, fathers or husbands? How do they bring up their children in Australia? So we know that there is a lot of parenting programs out there, and we are embedding this ourselves, you know, in our parenting programs at Wellsprings, through the Respectful Relationships programs as well. Having the voices of men from migrant refugee background is an important part, I think. Now, what they also talked about, we asked them what would help. They said that what would help is that they really needed targeted and community-led and co-designed programs from their community, by them, for them, on gender equality, on respectful relationship and prevention of family violence. Programs that really resonate with them in their own culture. Not to forget that they also raised a lot of issues related to religion and how religion plays a part in shaping their roles, shaping their understanding of gender and what they're supposed to be doing from a religious point of view. And tackling that is something that's going to need time. It's going to need people who are very knowledgeable from a religious perspective, and to talk about these issues. Otherwise, many of them will just not. They will not be engaged on this issue unless the things that are help, if you like, that contribute to their identity is. If we're not tackling that, the change will not happen. If the conversation is silent on this, if the conversation is silent on the deep rooted issues that form their sense of identity as men, is not allowed to be explored, it will remain like the elephant in the room. So having culturally relevant and nuanced respectful relationship programs for migrant and refugee couples is important. And again, you know, you all talked about using positive language with emphasis on families' health and well-being is an important way of framing the conversation and any program that is designed, if it's designed around the family and the importance of family and the importance of raising healthy and well-adjusted children in the Australian context, is going to be one of those hooks, if you like, that can be used in engaging the men. So in finishing off, what we've got a couple of things happening that I'd like to invite you to. One is during the 16 days of activism coming up, we have a dowry abuse seminar on the 3rd of December from 10 to 12. It's going to be online, and it will be, actually it's almost full, that one. I'm not sure if we've got any more room there, but the next one is Migrant and Refugee Men Speaking Out on Migration and Gender Roles. In that seminar, there will be, I'll be having a conversation with a couple of men. Jazz Beer is one and Dang is another. I'll be presenting quickly a bit about what we've done, but also interviewing them about their perspectives on these issues. And then we will have also a speaker, Hala Abdul Noor, who's done a lot of work with migrant refugee men who do use violence. And she will share her research that she's done recently during COVID on what services have been doing in relation to migrant refugee men who use violence. So that particular one seminar is not full as yet, so you're welcome to register for it. I think you will find it really fascinating and quite eye-opening, if you like, in relation to those issues. And I'm sorry to see that the lady who actually asked the question about this particular issue had to leave before my presentation. So if we are recording it, that's good, Zoe. She can catch up on that.
Yeah, we are recording.
Thanks.
And I will absolutely make sure she gets today's presentation.
Thank you. I think that's it.
Great. Thank you very, very much,
Sharing.
Dalal. Yes. Fascinating. Thank you so much, Dalal. And it's incredible, you know, the diversity of the work happening in the region, but that we are, I think, all, yeah, there seems to be a lot of crossover in terms of the practical hooks and leverage points that we're finding in this work around, you know, you mentioned the parenting, the mental health as a hook as well as a secondary outcome of this work. The planets are aligning with all of our work in a region. And we've got a question from Danny. How do we register? Yes, I will include the links. Is that okay, Dalal, in the email after today? I'll send out flyers and links and direct you to the two events. Okay, so we now have approximately 10 minutes for questions. So please feel free to take yourself off mute and ask any of our guest speakers today from the 3 different projects that we've shared. Yeah, please feel free to ask a question over the chat or on camera. I think, Rob, you had one. We were chatting in the break. Are you still there, Rob? I don't know if you wanted to share your question for Kerry.
Kerry did answer it. Yeah, I'm happy to read out what I asked. Let's see. Yeah, great work, Kerry and co. In the year 4 of that particular case study, the boy's behaviour started a downward turn. And around about the time the teacher went on leave, was it intentional to point out subtly that the teacher was male, maybe to introduce the importance of modelling and validating behaviour from positive male role models? And she said, yes, definitely.
No, definitely. Something that was quite pointed, and we're pretty privileged at Edithvale to have employed quite a lot of males, but really wanted to emphasise that point with them, and something that Paul has said that resonates as well. You know, as teachers, we're always on. And that's something that we really wanted to hit home, that as a male teacher, your behaviour and the things that you're expressing, even the way you talk to education support class, other parents, other teachers, the kids are watching. Yeah, so really influential to have that in there, and particularly our younger guys could then relate to experiences in football clubs and cricket clubs and all of that type of thing, and recognising and putting a name to that for them as well, which was really, really impactful. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Kerry. Okay, we've got a question from Louise. Thank you for the question, Louise. Louise says, hi, I'm the schools coordinator for the South Eastern Centre Against Sexual Assault, SACASA. We run a high school and primary school programme aimed to address gender-based violence and respectful relationships. Just wondering what services are available for someone to look over our programme and make suggestions to improve it. We want to make our boys programme targeted, but we need some help. Oh, great. Putting it out there, Louise. I love it. Does anybody want to respond to Louise on that particular question?
What about the critical friends, Zoe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Louise, you might be a critical friend actually yourself. Not 100% sure, but I think so.
I'll start talking. Hello.
Hi, Louise.
Hi. Yeah, I don't think we are a critical friend. We didn't sign up for that project as we didn't really feel like we had the capacity to do it, and we don't actually have any like formal involvement or funding from the Department of Education. So that my management chose to not to do that. So I guess, yeah, we're just, you know, we've got these high school programs, particularly with primary school, it's protected behaviours, and high school we're running these two programs, like a girls program and a boys program, for like 20 years, but you know, hasn't been evaluated in quite a long time. And you know, we really want to make a great targeted, particularly a boys program. I think it's really important, but I just don't even know where to start.
Okay, well, we can certainly have a conversation.
Totally,
obviously, wise, you know, we can connect on that, Louise, absolutely, and we'd love to, you know, learn more about the work that you're doing. Also, I will open up an opportunity to you to join a webinar which is happening later in November. I believe there are 3. Great. Which is for the critical friends and for schools around healthier masculinity. So Paul will be running that. So there's another opportunity there to kind of apply more of that lens. But yeah, certainly we can have a chat about the work that you're doing and have a look and see if we can assist. Absolutely.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you.
Danny says Lizzie Fox came from SACASA. She'll be able to advise. Absolutely. Yeah, we work together with Lizzie Fox, who's at the Department of Education and Training.
Yes, she was the pre-successor to me 2 years ago. Yeah, so she was in my role before that. Yeah, I know Lizzie.
Beautiful. Great. Thanks, Danny. Thanks, Louise. We will connect. Does anybody else have any questions?
Could I just add for Louise, the pit stop course that I created had that evaluated by a university simply by putting it out there to the Dean of the School of Social Sciences, and they were always looking for projects that their doctoral students can participate in. So they were very friendly and did the whole thing for free, and it was very valuable. Yeah. But that was some years ago. They probably moved on. But the principle's still there.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Rob. Okay. Okay, so time is 11:51. What I'm going to do is start sharing my screen, if it's okay, with the QR code for our evaluation. I'll also share a link in the chat and ask you, please, if it's okay, to spend 2 minutes just letting us know what you thought of today's communities of practice. Obviously, its success 100% relies on your input, and we need, if you can, please, just to send us your thoughts on what worked and what didn't, and also let us know if you are interested in being part of a future Communities of Practice. We will be running an Engaging Men and Boys Communities of Practice, the third and final one. It'll probably be in March next year. So yeah, if you are planning some work in this space, already engaged in work with men and boys, please let us know on that SurveyMonkey, and yeah, we can invite you to present your work or your thoughts on planning work. It doesn't have to be something that's completed or in final edits. Yeah, this is your space to share. So please don't hesitate to do so. Great. Okay, does anybody have any final comments or suggestions, questions? Because if not, we might move to a close. And yeah, thank you so much to everybody for being part of this fantastic work. It's super exciting last year we were talking about the theory, I think, in these Communities of Practice, very much around the theory of healthy masculinities, and now here we are talking about the work that's already happening in our region. So as you mentioned before, Mandy, the work's evolving. So yeah, we're learning as we go, and wonderful to have your involvement. So thank you very much for being here, and yeah, we will move to a close. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Zoe.
Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
See you. Bye-bye. Great. Screen's frozen.
Thanks, Zoe, for having us part of that. That was really cool. And Kerry, well done. That was a great presentation. Really.
Do we stay on for a debrief or anything, Zoe, or?
If you'd like to, you're very welcome to. I think it last time, remember, we cut you off.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Cool. I just. Great. So it's just us now. Thanks, everyone. Wow, we went so well with timing. That was great.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Really, really good.
Mm.
Fantastic. And pretty good turnout. We got 38 people who registered, and I think we had pretty much 30. So that was including us, but the 38 was anyway. So
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
yeah.
I tried to keep my part because I know it was dry, talking about governance and evaluation. I mean, it's hard to make that sound exciting and interesting, but yeah, I tried to keep it contained, so I'm hoping I didn't waffle too much. Go on.
Ali, you did super well at being so concise, and that information is really, really helpful, because this year's about practice. So
Yeah, I thought it was really good too, Ellie, for your feedback.
Oh, good,
Yeah.
thank you.
You really underlined just how much work goes into those planning stages.
Oh my goodness, yeah. That's why I sort of mentioned Mandy, because I know for me, my diary has just been popping off left, right and centre, because we've had so many meetings where we have needed to really nut some of that stuff out. And it's, I'm not a communications expert or evaluation, but I still need to attend those meetings. So when things come up, I know what's going on and when things are being activated. So yeah, and it's good because it means I'm kind of then learning as I go as well. But yeah, it is a lot of meetings, but I also didn't kind of want to scare people off either, because like we're all so excited and passionate about this, and it's awesome that it's getting cracking as well. So it's like trying to express to people that it is a lot of work, but it's so worthwhile, and the outcomes that are going to come out of this are going to be amazing for the municipality. So but yeah, it's about people being prepared when they go in, that they don't think, oh, just you're going to have this 0.4 EFT that's going to do all the work. No way. There is a whole bundle of us sitting around that person that are also putting in EFT to this as well. But, it's great because everything will be covered and it'll be hugely successful.
Yeah, Great. And that person coming into the project role at point 4, is that for 2 years? Is that for?
Yeah, it'll be a 2-year. Yeah.
Great.
And it was interesting chatting about my osteo last night. So we love chatting about things, and I was telling her about the projects and stuff. I said, this is what I'm doing tomorrow. And she was chatting about her partner, who's a tradie, and he's very, he'll cook dinner, like, he'll do beautiful things for her, like do a bath for her with candles. Like he's just so beautiful and supportive. And apparently they went and had dinner with 2 of their friends, male and female, and Will asked his friend, how often have you cooked dinner, mate, whilst during in lockdown? And his friend said, twice. The girlfriend sort of does it. And he's like, okay. And he said, what time do you get home from work? And he said, 3:30. What time does she finish work? About 6 o'clock. So why are you not cooking dinner then, if you're actually literally sitting there waiting for her to finish? So and I said to my osteo, oh gosh, I said, when this program's advertised, I thought I might be grabbing your partner, because he's and apparently she was saying he gets all those names you talked about, Paul, you're a wuss, you're a this and that. His friends say stuff like that to him, but it seems to be kind of water off a duck's back for him. And I said to my osteo, oh my gosh, I need him. I said, he is like, I'm going to send you the information so you can pass it on to him, because he's a site manager of all these tradies. And I thought, he is an influencer at the end of the day. Yes. And I just thought, wow. So, they've got this quite nice relationship, because he is supportive. He's not going to, conform to, and look, he is quite macho and stuff like that. But in terms of their relationship, he's happy to, it's he wants it to be as equal as possible. He's not going to sit there watching TV whilst she has to work for an extra 3 hours before he gets his dinner. It's like, oh God.
Yeah, it doesn't threaten his masculinity.
No, that's right. And the fact that he's happy to challenge his mates on it, I was like, oh, that's really awesome. Yeah, I want him. So
good. Strategic moves.
I just had to share that, because it's like after since seeing the man box, like it resonates. It is just really obvious, and I still haven't stopped talking about it, Paul. So I do love the work.
You've picked up a really good and I might even borrow it if you don't mind. I'm forever looking for examples of that, and I was wondering when you were speaking whether you're going to say, and he keeps getting grief from his mates, and I just knew it was coming. See you, Laura. That's the part, I think, where we are right now. I think in time, I think there's these people like you're talking about who are just kind of going, well, really? Let's move past that. Where I still think the majority of men haven't given it any thought. Like it's just like ignorance, seriously. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean pure ignorance, unaware. And I've worked we did a lot of work a few years ago in a trade training centre, and those men would just be beautiful, and they go, oh, I've never stopped to think about it like that. And the other part in the trade training centre, this is when we'll talk about the patriarchy. The patriarchy is responsible for it, but it's also responsible for hurting men as well. And I think we'll eventually get to a conversation where we can get people to the patriarchy, but we've got to kind of, if you come to the patriarchy first, men get defensive because they have been hurt by the patriarchy, and they go, get stuffed. That I haven't benefited from that. No. But if you come this way and go all this through it, and then you show them the patriarchy, they go, oh yeah, I agree.
Makes sense.
Correct. So it's how you do it. It's the same with toxic masculinity. You put that up there, and men go bugger off.
Oh yeah.
And here, and they arrive at, and they go, oh, this is toxic masculinity. And you go, yes. And they go, yeah, that's terrible. And I think that's when I was listening. It's fascinating listening to newly arrived migrants. It's almost like we have to put the same thing in place for always been here blokes, because they haven't really reflected enough on their own culture, or had the chance to do it in a safe place. I think,
I think even coming from the UK, I've read something fairly recently that said potentially, as a theory, the reason why gender stereotypes, certainly masculine gender stereotypes, seem to be stronger in Australia than they are in Britain, might well have been as a result of the migration experience and moving to a country and settlement and having to work the land that kind of, rightly or wrongly, does, you know, really reinforce, stereotypes. It's notable for me living here as opposed to when I go back. The first week I spend constantly noticing the difference.
Yeah,
You're far from perfect.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and that's I love those stories because it reinforces that the culture is a construct. Because if it was innately male, then you should be able to go anywhere on the planet and it would be exactly the same. So there's your theory straight away, hanged in there and said, we've constructed this. And yeah, that part that was really good about the journey of people. And like I think even my father coming here from Italy was a similar journey. It was war and conflict that they had been through.
Yes.
My grandfather had been through the war in the days that he never talked about it. And he was an angry, unhappy man, you know, but he was also looking after his family. He brought them to another country, for God's sake. And so there's this tension between, don't tell me there's something wrong as a man to say that I need to look after my family, because you can sometimes read that as a overprotective, dominant male. But if you've been through a war and you've had to had bullets shot at you to keep your family safe.
Yeah. And someone tries to tell you different, you'd be like, hold on.
So I think that whole idea of listening is a very important feature that often gets left behind, because everyone's bringing their own journey and their own story. And I know I'm preaching to converted, but you only have to scratch the surface. I could walk into Kerry's school, and I'd be there for 5 minutes. I'd find the kid that's probably driving them all mad. And in the right moment, at the right time, you scratch the surface and blow me down if there's not a story behind that kid and why they're behaving that way. And sometimes I think being a former teacher, we get so busy and we forget just to pause for a minute and go, I wonder what the backstory is here.
Yeah, you know? I think that's so important, the listening.
And you've heard me say this, Kerry, because you've heard that conversation. And then when that boy is 55, still no one's listened to him. And we've labelled him the bad guy up the street. And that takes enormous energy to find empathy for a guy who's doing some pretty crappy things. It takes enormous capacity. But to me, it's the only hope we have with that guy is if we go to him with empathy and compassion rather than anger and